This next panel is focused on the flight to quality and health, trends from building owners. Can I please invite to the stage Deepa from EN3, Gigi from Nuclear Office Parks, Samaya from Prestige Group, and Priyanka from Tata Realty. Okay, so it's getting a little bit later in the afternoon, and as I said, I would like to have a little bit of fun with this panel to begin with. I'm going to not ask a question about where you would want to be in the world, but I'm going to ask something maybe a little bit sillier than that. If you could be any animal, what would you be and why? Deepa, you're going to go first. You're going first, Deepa. If you could be any animal in the world, what would you be and why?
I think probably a squirrel, because if you look at the squirrel is probably the largest plantation agent in the world. Every time they drop a seed, a tree springs up. So hopefully a squirrel.
I love that focus on sustainability. Gigi.
Jack, this is the most difficult question to answer, to be honest. I would like to be a horse because horse represents speed, it represents strength, and moving faster. So that's where I will look at it.
Yeah, excellent.
Did you say horse? Yeah. Okay, I had that in mind, but I'll stick to the horse, but no specific reason.
Okay. Priyanka.
So I would like to be a fish in the water because I want to start that, the fight against humans, right? Because the plastic waste that we are disposing in the seas and the effect that aquatic animals are having, right? So I would like to be a fish in the water to clean up that.
Yeah. I love that. Often when I ask that question, the immediate reaction is a bird because people want to fly. But I think that focus on sustainability is very admirable and maybe one of the reasons why we all have you on the panel today. So I want to start off with a question about where we are in this evolution of society. I mean, obviously we've been through this point in time, post-pandemic or, during the pandemic, where the focus of our buildings has changed. Tenants, occupants, they understand their buildings in a different way. And for some, we thought that we were going to be seeing a healthy buildings revolution. And to some degree, we may be seeing that. But my question is, do you think that momentum is continuing? Or several years after the start of the pandemic, are we going back to new norms? Or is this something that is continuing? I might start with Samaya, you first.
10 years back, we were in the business of certification, only certification, no left and no right. But I think now we are moved into the business of actually sustainability and wellness. And that's the big change which has come across. As a developer, I can speak. And today, Prestige is actually doing LEED certification in excess of 10 million square feet as we speak today. And all our new buildings, which would be another 25 million square feet in the next 5 years, would be well certified, not rating, including the certification, plus the LEED Platinum for core and shell. So we as developers, I think he will agree with me that we have understood and accepted the need of R. And we are very much into it right from the start.
Priyanka, maybe you next?
Yeah, I guess everyone has spoken about the pandemic and the impact it has caused, and we can see the trends where the occupiers are giving importance to all the parameters in whether it is indoor environmental quality parameters or whether it is about health, wellness, mindfulness about being in the space. I think so that is translating into the agreements that we make with occupiers, and that we can see clearly. And that's where, like he said, we have given a commitment of subscribing all our properties, assets, the entire portfolio for WELL. And we understand the value of WELL certification, and it is creating an impact that we are able to see, a tangible impact from a transaction and a commercial perspective also. So yeah.
Gigi, what about you? Is this something that is here to stay, or is it something that is a flash in the pan?
No, I would probably look at a little back. I think I'll start on a lighter vein. Probably we all measured dates and months in a calendar which was Gregorian calendar till 2020. After that, we said there is another calendar which is not AC and AD and BC, it is BC and CD. BC and AC after COVID and before COVID. So, but I don't really subscribe to the view that no, COVID had made us life completely different or transformed the way we are looking at the way we live and work. I would really look at a transformational change over the period of happening, which has been happened from probably Industrial Revolution onwards. Industrial Revolution really transformed the way the offices function. At that point of time, probably office spaces were built up to look at how you communicate, how you interact with other people. And if you look at, for many years, it continued in the same manner. If you look at the generations after that, probably we called as baby boomers, when they came into existence from people who are born between, I think 1946 and 1964, yeah. they looked at office in a different perspective. They wanted a structured office. They were looking at, really looking at hierarchies. They were looking at job security and so on and so forth. The office really transformed that into that perspective where you had more office cabins, you had less open offices. And if you look at the next Gen X, Gen X was completely different set of people who really looked at office spaces in a different perspective. They wanted open layout, but then they still wanted some little bit of privacy. The office design, office evolution happened in that manner. If you move to the millennials, I think they are the one who really transformed the way the building is being looked at. So over a period of time, I think it's an evolution. It is not exactly one incident in the history of mankind has really transformed the office space. And COVID has had its impact to some extent, but then over a period of time, it is waning in my view. And COVID is one incident that alone cannot transform the way we work and we design the offices. It is a transformational change which happens over a period of time along with the needs and wants of the people who are occupying the space. That's the way I look at it.
Really insightful, Gigi. Deepa, obviously you work with many organisations. Is this something that is here to stay?
Yeah, it's definitely here to stay. But in terms of how far we've gotten, we still have a long way to go. I mean, today we're looking at probably preaching to the choir here because they have already done it.
The leaders.
But then there are so many others that are out there that are still thinking about it, probably want to do it, but something's holding them back. And I'm sure that as a movement, it's here to stay. But there's still a long way to go. I'm just adding from where Gigi left off. He was talking about how each generation, the requirements have evolved. Same thing, if you look at the building industry in India itself, I think in the 60s, 70s, our priority was just a roof over our head. And then in the 80s, 90s, we started looking at aspects like quality. Is the building safe? Am I getting a good quality building? Am I actually, in a comfortable environment? It's probably only in the 2000s have we started looking at sustainability and 2010 onwards wellness. So I think that as generations have evolved, the way we have built and occupied buildings have also evolved. So, and it's going to evolve. So it's not something that's going to go away. So this is definitely something that is there to stay. But how fast are people going to adopt it is probably where we still are lagging behind. Where we see statistics of millions of square feet going green or well, that's still a very small percentage of the actual construction that's happening in the country. And I think that's where we need to work to try to get there faster and quicker.
Yeah, a really, really good point. And, I don't think you can really overstate sharing the stories from the leaders, like what we have today, in terms of the ability to drive the market forward, because that pushes the market, that shows what's possible. One thing that we're seeing across Asia Pacific in particular, and this also includes India, is a blurring of lines in the division of responsibility between the building owner and the developer, and the corporate occupier and the tenant. So what we're seeing across Asia and Asia Pacific in particular, more so than I would argue that we're seeing in the US, more so than what we're seeing in Europe, is this idea that building owners want to provide more and more and more health and well-being, amenity, sustainability support to their tenants. Is this what you're seeing within your context of your organisations, and what are some of the health and well-being interventions that you're doing to support your tenants, support their occupants? So I might start with Priyanka with this one.
Jack, I'll take a slightly different view on that. I'll share my view from a regulatory perspective. Right? So even though Tata Realty is not a listed company, right, but we have tenants who are listed, and they have some ESG disclosures to be made. And India is evolving, the Indian regulatory landscape is evolving at that pace where SEBI wants to integrate ESG in the disclosures of the companies. And hence, there is a beautiful annexure which goes with the annual reports, which is called as Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting. And it is made on the 9 principles given by SEBI, which is for, which is called as the National Guideline for Responsible Business Conduct. And one of the, I'm so sorry. And one of the principle talks about health and safety. One of the the same principle talks about, do you provide access to specially abled employees in your organization? Do you have special kind of amenity? So when these occupiers who are listed, who basically comply to all these regulations, they come to us. They expect the same thing. And we, being, well certified, we are already doing that. So it just matches the requirement and the demand that we are, providing. So yes, there is an increased demand. There is an increased awareness as well, at least from the listed companies' perspective that I can see. Of course, the companies or the occupiers whose parent company is an MNC, they are practicing that in the other parts of the world, and hence those practices also get absorbed in the Indian entity, and they also require same kind of things from us. So yeah, there is quite a bit of awareness around it, and there's a regulatory push also. So it becomes a little easy for us to suffice to those requirements. That's what I think.
Gigi, what are your thoughts on that? I think that, we're starting to see more and more building owners put in things like showers and fitness facilities, even in some cases a healthy juice bar within the lobby. This is not being done for the sake of it. This is being done because there's obviously some demand from the tenants for those types of things. Are you seeing that at Nucleus?
Absolutely. The responsibility between occupier and the developer or the owner of the assets is blurring. I would say probably yes or no. It depends on the context. Today, if you look at the Indian real estate market, I would see a lot of significant growth happening in the flex spaces. When you talk about the flex spaces, their ownership of sustainability and well-being is with the operator. So that perspective, I think they are growing at the rate of almost 50 to 60% per annum. That's the way it looks at. And it's expected to be at 106 million square feet by 2027, or 2025 or 26 kind of numbers. So that really one context where I say that the responsibility in occupier and the developer, is blurring. But when it comes to traditional office space, I would see a lot to go in that perspective because it depends on the market demand which comes up in the way. If there is a demand, real estate owners will really be happy to invest and make it work. See, I'd probably look at an anecdote related to the LEED. When LEED came to India in early 2000, there were very few takers to the building, maybe 5 or 6 or 3, 4 buildings in India as such. But by 15, 20 years of time, today you can't survive in a building sector without a LEED certified building. So they took almost 15 to 20 years to reach that stage. And probably I'm seeing green shoots with you. IWA is able to shorten that period to a large extent. And that's where I see, it will come from 3 perspectives, I think, that demand. I think one is, I'm not sure the occupiers are here, many of them. I would like to see them paying as a green premium for doing it, actually speaking. Or otherwise, it should come in the form of a regulatory framework which calls for such requirements. Or third, the process of elimination, as I mentioned about in lead case, it should happen. So one of these things happens, then probably there is a great way of making it work together and then achieve what we are aiming to achieve.
Some very insightful comments there, Gigi. Samaya, I'm interested in your perspective. I distinctly remember I had a meeting with one of your colleagues, Purana, maybe 12 months ago, and she said during the meeting, she said, all of our tenants are asking for this. All of our tenants expect this now. Is that what you're seeing play out within your tenant community as well?
Yeah, you mentioned, is there a line between the developer and occupier? In fact, there's no line. There's a proper marriage today because of the green lease.
Yeah.
We both signed the green lease without even looking at what is the clauses mentioned. So we both understand and we have both aligned towards that. That's one of the reasons because of which the developer and the occupier are aligned. The second, obviously, when she mentioned about the regulatory bodies, CB coming in, insisting that the ESG reports are put in our annual reports. So that has pushed us to do that. Third, I think to some extent, as a country, we are a little more polluted, we are a little more unhealthy. So I guess as developers, we believe that we have a moral responsibility to improving that. So I put these three aspects towards the relationship between developer and the occupant.
Really interesting. I hadn't thought of that moral obligation before, but that's a very interesting point. Deepa, what about you? What are you seeing in terms of that blurring of lines between, building owners and corporate occupiers? Obviously, you work with a large number of building owners, a large number of corporate occupiers. Are we still in the days where corporate occupiers are complaining because their base building isn't doing enough, or are we in a more collaborative space now?
It's definitely more collaborative, like Soumya was saying. It's a good integration now. We're seeing a lot of projects where both the base build and the fit outs are working together for a collective objective. And, that's very good to see. Because what happens, I think, that is both sides understand that it's not just the moral responsibility, but it's also when you do it together, it's a lot easier and it's a lot simpler. So we're seeing a lot of integration on both sides. And it also, one influences the other. We're seeing a lot of cases where the base building is going for lead and well. There might be a few tenants who are not looking at it. And they have started telling them that, we are providing all of this. There's only so much more you have to do. Why don't you look at lead and well for your fit outs? So that's also happening, which is a very heartening thing. I think that in the early days of lead, it was a market driven by the occupiers who were asking for the base builds to be LEED certified, which pushed the developers to go for LEED. But in the case of well, actually it's the other way around. We're seeing all the base builds having embraced it much faster than actually the occupiers and the tenants themselves. So it's sort of a flip. And that's probably why, like he was saying, the 20-year of movement for green is probably we're looking at an 8-year movement for well in a same level. You're seeing a much faster growth at a much shorter time.
I would like to add here. So probably, don't consider me as a doomsayer in that perspective, because we did a customer survey last year, and we asked the clients whether, how does it matter to you when you are in a sustainable building or not a green building? I think, sir, what is the number you think they would have said no? 30% of the people said it doesn't matter to us. Yeah. So that's a surprising news. We are saying that we are getting married to each other, we are doing all those kind of things, but unfortunately, that's not the ground reality, is my view. And second is, will an occupier pay a premium to a building which is sustainable question is very high? My answer again to that question is also no. So that's where probably the challenge is coming in terms of making investments from a developer perspective. That's something which we should really address. See, if you look at real estate spend from any real estate company, there are 3 spends which they give it to us. One is the rental, then second is the common area maintenance, and third is the utility. Electricity consumption, water consumption, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, in most of the cases, these costs are passed through. So if as a developer, I make an investment to make more sustainable, then I don't get the returns because it's a pass through. So that is a fundamental challenge we are facing as a developer, which I think the whole community should work together to make it in a different manner, where I'm being more efficient, I should be rewarded for it. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
I want to touch on something that Deepa just said as well in terms of that uptake in real estate versus corporate occupiers. If you look at the first 5 years of WELL in the US, about 75% of the certifications were corporate occupiers and about 25% were base building or building owners. If you look at the first 5 years of WELL in Australia, about 75% of the certifications or the ratings were base building owners and 25% were corporate occupiers. If you look at the first 5 years in India, it's almost a 50-50 split. So it's jumped ahead. We're no longer having these arguments about base building, corporate occupier. Everyone just seems to want to engage in the conversation around health and well-being. And I think that's a very unique position that the Indian market finds itself in. We're almost in this like very sweet spot where as a building owner, you don't need to convince your tenant. As a tenant, you don't need to convince your building owner. There's this mutual understanding that it's currently existing in the marketplace. Now, I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of get a little bit specific. I've got a couple of slides here. Now, these four individuals have really led the Indian market when it comes to WELL at Scale. And WELL at Scale, as Prateek mentioned earlier, is a holistic way to engage with the WELL program. But one thing that I wanted to mention about WELL at Scale is that every year, organisations get these summary reports. And this shows organisations how they compare to their peers. So it shows them how they compare to their peers at a total level through the WELL score. But you can see here, it also shows how they compare to their peers on an individual concept level. So you can see that an organisation is performing quite well in air quality compared to the rest of the market, or it might be a little bit behind on thermal comfort compared to the rest of the market. Now, we accumulate all of that data on an annual basis, and we present the total average scores for the year. So you can see here, and this is data that is relatively fresh off the press, that the average global WELL score is 39. That was an 18% increase from 2022. The global WELL score for real estate specifically is 40, which is a 5% increase from 2022. And the non-real estate, or the corporate occupier average, is 38, which is a 108% increase from 2022. So one important thing about this is that the corporate occupiers are catching up to real estate. Real estate has often been seen as the leaders in this room, and I think that still continues to be the case, certainly by these numbers. But corporate occupiers are catching up. They're understanding that they can actually have a huge impact on occupant health and well-being. The last thing that I wanted to kind of mention before I open up to another question is the regional averages. So you can see here that in the Americas, the average WELL score is 22. In Africa, the average WELL score is 27. In Europe, it's 42. In Asia, including India, it's 42, and in Oceania, it's 58. Now, a lot of that is tied to ESG, in my opinion. If you look at the regions in terms of how regions perform from a GRES perspective, so for those of you who don't know, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and you compare that to some of the figures that we're seeing here, there's a very strong alignment. Oceania, Asia, leading the way. Europe, pretty hot on the heels. Americas, not doing quite as well. I'm being as diplomatic as possible with that. So I'm interested in the panel, why do you think Asia, India, Oceania has embraced this notion of ESG, particularly with a focus on social sustainability? Why have these regions embraced this so well compared to maybe more established regions like Europe and the US? This is a big question. Who wants to tackle it first? Gigi.
Yeah, I would see India has been a country which is very easy for adoption of new technologies and new things. It has been a country like that. As I mentioned, if you look at lead, 20 years, today India is the third largest market for lead globally. And probably for you, you achieved that grade in 10 years. So for you, it's the third largest market. So India has an inherent strength of itself adapting to newer things. That's point number one. In real estate is probably accentuated by the fact that we had good, very diverse, very focused developers in the country, a lot of them, because they have been aligned to the global requirements and basically a competition between them who will do better. That competition led 1 point. And second is, surely the major clients for IT sector, real estate in India, is primarily the IT companies, like the Intels of the world or the Siemens of the world and those kind of companies. So they knew about the principles and what is the requirement, so they pushed us to do a lot more things. And third is probably the advent of institutional investors in India, like Blackstone, Brookfield, and so on and so forth companies, which really pushed the envelope a little bit more. And on the lighter side, probably I look at one more thing, right? Probably a lack of trust. The clamor for third-party certifications is probably an indication of lack of trust in Indian real estate developers by the global community. That could be one of the reasons. This is the way I look at things.
I think that's a very valid reason. I actually don't. I think that's actually a reason why Oceania performs so well, because there's a lack of trust in contractors and workmanship over an extended period of time that has led to this desire for third-party verification and this desire for performance verification as well.
And it's also, I think, to do a lot with the culture of the region.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, we've always been, resource efficiency, because we never had enough resources as a region. And if you talk of the entire APAC, that's been the thought process. So right from a cultural fundamental standpoint, you want to save water, you want to save energy. This has always been driven deeply into a lot of, the culture in the region. So that's pushed people. I think that what we lacked for a long time was structured frameworks that could tell people the best way to do things. And when LEED and WELL and many of these ratings came, I think the reason there was a big uptake and people embraced it was because we didn't have a framework before. And this actually helped people to do what they wanted to do in a more structured and scientific way, rather than just doing it based out of prior knowledge or experience or hearsay. So a lot of the Asia region, I would think ESG became important. I think that we were doing bits and pieces of all of this before the term ESG actually came into existence, and it's just that ESG and LEED and all of these frameworks just helped us do it better and helped us actually measure what we were doing in a better way.
Priyanka, Samaya, any thoughts on this particular topic?
I just have 2 points here. One is from the investor perspective. So when we talk about GRESB or when we talk about WELL, it's an assessment. It's a benchmarking that you are doing for your company, right? And it will be published, it will be consumed by, of course, your clients, customers, but most primarily by the investors. Yeah. And that's why I think so, and of course, Asia being the emerging market, and we all know that the investments in terms of real estate or any kind of development is going largely in the Asian market. And hence, investors are keen on performance of the companies on the ESG parameter. I'll also add a point on social, because you asked about it. From an India perspective, again, I'll say we already have Companies Act, Factories Act, so many acts, so many regulations. So a lot of companies are already abiding to it. They have certain kind of processes, procedures, systems in place. They need to strengthen it. So with these kinds of assessment, they get a direction that yes, these are there. But if we need to perform on these assessment, the practices that we are already doing, we have to strengthen those practices. So things are there. We are strengthening on it. That's what I can say. And that's why I think so the Asian market is performing pretty well. Yeah.
Very well, very well.
The other thing with all these scores are, most of Asia is a development market.
Yeah.
They are new projects where it's easier to implement well. A lot of Americas are probably retrofits, and it's more expensive and more complex to do that, and it takes more time. So probably clients in that region haven't done all of it because it's expensive and the well scores are still lower, whereas a lot of Asia, Oceania is new construction. So a lot of the well-certified projects are new projects where it's easier to implement. So that's also another reason why you possibly see a better score in this region.
Yeah. Samaya, any thoughts?
I wanted to actually take a pass on this question because I had a different version. I thought ESG was a forced intervention in Indian market, especially for the corporate world. It was more a forced intervention till it became a law, and then it became a necessity. And with a lot of our service providers are outside India, so they have started demanding it. Otherwise, I think it was more of a just do it because it's a regulatory body had asked us to do it. We did a lot of work on environment, the E part, because there is efficiency question there. There is water management question. We realized that that is actually going to benefit me a lot as a developer. But in the S part, the social part, we are a little slow because it's outside our control. We have to do things which is outside the body of our thing. So we are pushing ourselves to do, but some of us are struggling with it. Construction company has labor-intensive companies, so diversity or equality doesn't work it that easily, whereas sitting in an office space, it works out much better. So that S part is still getting developed, I think, and the G part, because of the forced intervention, it is coming in.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. This kind of this complexity around the S, which I think is to some degree held back industry for a long time. And if I can say quite plainly, I think that the emergence of WELL and the emergence of IWBI has created some sort of clarity around the S. And often, we show big graphs of uptake in WELL, and a lot of people assume that it's due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say that this growth was happening before the pandemic. We were on a growth trajectory way before the pandemic. It's just that the pandemic put the fuel on a fire that was already happening. And I think ESG was that fire. ESG was, investor expectations were certainly maturing. And if you looked at ESG reports, or what we used to call CSR reports, corporate social responsibility reports, even 5-10 years ago, and you went to the social page, there were a bunch of stories. But as an investor, how can you make judgments on stories alone? You need hard data. And I think that's where this kind of well-at-scale approach with the scores, with the approach to indoor air quality, the approach to more metrics around diversity, equity, inclusion, I think that is where we're starting to see maturity in the market around the S. Gigi, did you have something to add around that?
No, basically, what we are talking about through the ESG at this stage, we are only touching the tip of the iceberg in Indian context, in my view. Because last week I came across two frightening statistics. One is India is standing 21st in terms of energy efficiency in buildings, which is, to me, is a shocker. Second, another data related to energy consumption, comparison between Indian countries and European countries, which says India consumes close to 450 units per $1,000 of GDP, whereas Germany consumes 120, Japan is at 155. We have a long way to go. That's all I would say.
Yeah. I'm interested in your thoughts. Something that has occurred to me over the last few weeks is that when you look at WELL in India, almost 100% of WELL in India is corporate office space. Almost 100%. If you look at Singapore, as an example, about 25 to 30% is education, so schools or universities. You look at Australia, multiple projects that are from the healthcare sector, some of our biggest hospitals. I think it's a great thing that India has so much penetration within the commercial office space. But you've got an audience here that works with buildings other than commercial office space. What would be your advice to them in terms of implementing WELL and having a mindset around health and well-being beyond just office space from your own perspective? I might go deeper first for this one.
I think that, we've been talking and I've been talking with Pratik for many years. Finally, we have well for residential that's come out.
That's true.
Because I think that one of the critical segments that was missing well is our homes. And I think that this framework will help residential buildings design better. It's a bit more complex in an educational institution perspective because we have different levels of schools and educational institutions that come up in the country. A lot of them are traditional government funded schools which don't necessarily have that in their radar to provide well and health related interventions yet. A few international schools might look at it, but that's going to be still a very small percentage of the overall schools that exist in the country. And there are not many new schools coming up. A lot of them are already there again to retrofit existing, is going to be difficult. So I think that it was easier because we're building a lot of commercial and new commercial. It was very easy to start adopting it in the commercial sector. I think it would be a little bit easier in the residential sector too, mostly in the mid-market and up-market sectors. Again, affordable housing would be a very different ball game, which is a big portion of India's development, which we'd probably still not address with well for residential. But other segments will take time because we don't have that kind of bandwidth and infrastructure and that kind of funding in those segments to be able to look at something beyond what they're doing currently.
Yeah.
So it might take time.
Yeah,
Eventually we'll get there. Even if you look at green buildings, I think that less than 2% of the hospitals and educational institutions are green in the country even today after 20 years. So it's a tough, and it's a very fragmented kind of setup.
Well, I was even thinking about San Francisco Airport, which is well certified. The Harvey Milk Terminal at San Francisco Airport is well certified. The Budapest Airport is well health safety rated. We have this incredible, I must say, incredible airport at Bangalore International Airport. What would be your advice as leaders in this industry? What would be your advice to Bangalore International Airport to get it well certified, as an example? What would you say to them if they said to you, you're a leader within the well certification space, what should we do?
No, primarily, as I mentioned in the earlier responses, in real estate commercial office space, the uptake of well and LEED happened because of the demand. It's primarily because of the demand, and then we are building a lot of new buildings across India, and the growth rate was probably 30-40% growth rate was happening every year. So that probably drove the adoption of well and LEED largely in that perspective. But when it comes to airports, probably when the new airports come in, it will surely happen in my view. And second, the cost of retrofit. And airport being a 24-hour operational, doing any retrofit is becoming a challenge in that perspective. So existing airport adopting these practices or a retrofit to accommodate this kind of requirements, probably I see a little difficulty there. But the new buildings surely would come along and then probably go for a certification.
There is an easier way than that. You can take an appointment with the chairman of BIAL and get a well certification done. No, but I think on a serious note, I saw the presentation on residences. That will take time to evolve. Yeah. We are still in our life where we put our shoes outside the home and walk inside. So we have a long way for cleanliness part. But I think from the mall's perspective, Prestige has a lot of malls with huge footfalls. There is an opportunity to look at well certification there, which I will probably take back to my mall vertical and discuss that. There is a huge opportunity there.
Priyanka, obviously Tata Realty, huge organization, lots of influence. What would be your advice to other sectors?
I may not be able to comment on airport, but I would like to comment on the educational buildings, right? So, I think so. LEED has created a program on creating awareness among students, right? That is one way of seeing it, creating awareness on the end beneficiary, and then the property in which the end beneficiary is working or studying needs to be upgraded. What we do in our CSR programs is, one of my CSR program, and it's really dear to my heart, is we have actually adopted 10, 15 schools in Pune, and we have created smart classrooms where they can access their syllabus of a particular class or a standard on those. And then, and these are all government schools. These are not corporate schools or private schools, high-end schools. These are very, very normal schools, right? And those students don't even get access to laptops. So seeing a digital classroom in itself is a very big thing for them. And as a next step, what we are thinking is to have one module from our side on energy efficiency or environment. But now that you spoke about well, now I feel that we need to add some more modules to that, right? So once we create that kind of an awareness from the childhood about health, safety, wellness, the person which will grow from the child will have all those things, in them, and they would like to go into the institution, educational institution, when they do their higher education or PhDs and all, in certain kind of schools which are accredited by well, right?
I love hearing your passion for schools. It's also a sector that I'm very passionate about as well, and bringing it back to indoor air quality, which has been a bit of a theme today. I remember reading the study that a CO2 concentration of about 2,500 ppm is equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05. Now, a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05 means that it is illegal to drive in the US and to drive in Australia. Now, if you go into a school in many parts of the world, you will see CO2 levels up at around 3,000 parts per million. So basically what we're saying is that we expect children to learn in these environments, but we would not expect somebody to get behind the wheel of a car. So I think we've got a huge issue, and that's why I think that this topic around indoor air quality is so important, not just for commercial office, but for all sectors. I'm conscious I want to give the opportunity for the audience to ask a question. We have got 4 incredible leaders when it comes to well at scale that are implementing well across multiple buildings, multiple locations. Does anybody have a question for our esteemed panel? It is a very shy group today. I don't know. We don't normally have this. No? That's okay. I am going to move on to the next question then. And that is the question that I asked the previous group. So in 30 seconds or less, can you tell me your favorite work policy, benefit or initiative that is helping to improve your own health? So not your colleagues, not your tenants, not the people that you work for, your own health. So what is one initiative at your work that is improving your own health? Priyanka, I'm going to start with you.
So as a Tata Group and as a Tata Group company, we are very passionate on employee volunteering, and we engage with a lot of community initiative programs. And we have different kinds of programs, right? One day initiative, few hours initiatives. There are long-term programs as well, which is called as a pro-engage. And as Tata Realty, we have made a volunteering policy where we encourage employees to take 5 days working leave, paid leave, and they can take it 1 day at a time or 5-day consolidated and go and do volunteering. I think so that I have availed, and it has helped me. Again, in the same schools, I go and I help students in learning. So that has incredibly helped me to at least have a work-life balance or calm myself down after an overwhelming job of sustainability.
Yeah. I love that. Samaya?
I think it was spoken earlier also, but in the industry we are in, the 5-day week is very difficult to achieve, but our management did that about a year back, and it's been a huge impact on our life-work balance. Initially, there was a lot of resistance to it. The project teams, the contractors were against it and said we will lose man hours, the productivity will go down. But trust me, everything is normal. The company has grown exponentially over the last year, and there's been absolutely no problem, and the work balance, life balance has improved. So that's something which, as a company which is in construction, it's been a huge win. And of course, the sick leave.
Yeah, sick leave as well. Yeah.
We guys don't get sick leave.
Yeah.
Or compensatory offs.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to fall sick.
Gigi.
So basically, our company does a lot of work for the employee engagement and health and well-being. We have programs like Employee Assistance Program, Healthy Meal Options, and so many multiple activities being done, wellness classes, wellness opportunities for people to participate in group events. The one which I like most was probably, which is I cannot buy outside or buy from outside is probably the ergonomic design of the chairs and the adjustable workstations I have today in my office, which really made my life easy thanks to Well.
I love that.
As a part of the Well certification, we changed over.
Well, it's funny that you say that because when I started with the organization in 2018, the biggest complaint that I would get was around sit-stand desks. Because people kept saying, you keep requiring 25% of sit-stand desks, that's too much. Today, most organizations are providing 100% sit-stand desks. So I think it's an example of how the market has shifted over time. Expectations, even 6 years ago, have changed so much. Deepa.
I think it's a focus on learning. So
Learning, yeah.
more education, more learning, not necessarily in our area of work, but in any area we find that when people actually engage themselves in learning something new, actually it makes them more not just physically healthier, but also mentally and emotionally healthier. So I think that a lot of focus on learning and doing different things and new things all the time really helps.
I think that's a really, really good one. Everyone, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking this incredible panel. They have contributed so much to Well in India, so please give them a warm round of applause. Thank you, everyone.